Now, I don't mean that everybody has to be a communist, believe that a revolution is possible, but literally, even people who are anti-communist have a stake in defeating red baiting. It is such a vicious tool, it's such a vicious weapon, that anyone who demands change is going to have to face this weapon. You could be the biggest anti-communist in the world, but don't ask for a raise. Don't try to get a tenant union going in your building, or you'll be the next to be red baited. And it has a tremendous impact on our movements for social and economic change when the powers that we face say, well, you're for change, but you're not for big change, right? You're just for little changes. And you're willing to wait another election or two, right? No, what's the matter? Are you a communist? Or maybe if you would just purge anybody from your ranks who's really into changing the system, who's very intransigent, then maybe we'd be willing to talk to you about your demands. But you know, we can't throw enough people overboard to be acceptable. It ends up me and you, and I'm not so sure I shouldn't throw you overboard. And then I'm the last one in the boat. I think that it's time, especially as this war is showing that it's going to be endless. And it's not just an external war, it's a domestic war as well. And the more we don't fight the war abroad, the more the war comes here. I don't want to say home, because this is not home for everyone on this continent. But the fact is that the line that keeps recurring in this novel in Yiddish is that if you don't go and fight the war still comes to find you. And we have to be able to have a basis to disarm those who are coming after us. And one of their worst weapons has been red baiting. And what does it mean? What does it mean to attack people for being revolutionary? You know, I just spoke recently at Faneuil Hall in Boston, and I saw that there was a plaque and said that Frederick Douglass came and spoke there and gave a very controversial talk. You know why it was controversial? I wasn't there, but I know. He called for the abolition of slavery. That's what was so controversial. There were a lot of people, white people, who were not enslaved, who were saying, well, we should be talking about moral persuasion, you know, but not defending African peoples who are enslaved, who are trying to break the shackles of slavery by organizing rebellions. That's going a little too far, too fast. Can't we just do it in a slower pace? Well, whether it's fast enough depended on whether or not you were enslaved. That's the truth. It's okay to be against slavery now, chattel slavery now, because it's no longer the dominant economic system. It's not a big threat. You have to be like, you know, some of the, like General Westmoreland or maybe a George Bush to be pro-slavery. Even they wouldn't say they were. They don't have to. They're for a more modern form of enslavement. But don't say you're for the abolition of capitalism, because now you've gone too far. After all, they tell us, this is the end of history. This is the highest form of social and economic organization to which we can aspire. Endless wars abroad, and the cities being drained and starved to feed the war machine, and homelessness and joblessness and lack of accessibility for disabled people. Women being beaten and battered and raped. Trans bashing and gay bashing. Joblessness and homelessness. People living under bridges while others live in mansions. This is it. This is the best it gets, they tell us. It's the order of things. That's what the feudal king said. That's what the slaveocracy said. They always say it's the end of history because they don't want history to sweep them away. And what is it that the red baiting is telling us we should be so fearful of? That we who do the work of the world every day together, we do it together, all around the globe, in an interrelated way, that we should fear taking the piece of paper that says that a handful of families own everything that we and our ancestors have produced through their sweat and toil and labor, and tear it up and say, we got a new contract now. It says we all made it, we all own it. It's the idea that we could plan what's needed, not just what's needed for people, but what's desired, what people's desires are to meet the needs of all. Not high technology, meaning layoffs and low pay, but liberating us for shorter and shorter work days. This idea is anathema to those who hold the piece of paper that says, you build it, but I own it, and you work for me, and I'll tell you how much of what you make you're going to get back every week. That's the dream part in this title, is to ask, is another world possible, or is it just a dream? I believe that the actual mechanism of history, the contradiction that is just stretching like a rubber band that's going to snap, of the polarization of wealth and poverty, of oppression and war and racism, the fact that everything on the top is moving to the right while all of our lives are in desperation moving to the left, is like plates, tectonic plates that are shifting, that produce the kind of friction that creates a social earthquake. I We saw in the States just weeks ago an immigrant rights movement come from apparently nowhere, up out into the streets by the millions of people who were undocumented, who were criminalized, who came out and marched together to say, si se puede, it can be done. It reminded me of the quote by Che Guevara when he said, let us be realistic, let us do the impossible. I'm not here to convince you that revolution is possible. I'm here to say we have to be able to come out of the closet with the anti-capitalist struggle. We have to be able to talk about what is possible, because if we can't, if we are fearful of being red-baited, then we are forced to have hat in hand when we ask for a raise, or to feel that there is no way out of this situation except to wait for yet another election in which it'll either be the hard cop this time or the soft cop next time. You know, there's a wonderful quote by Lenin in which he said, sometimes decades go by and nothing seems to happen. And then weeks go by and decades happen. We as a movement are on the eve of decades happening. We need to be ready to discuss what kind of world we want to live in. Not just to discuss the grievances we have now, but to be able to talk about how to widen our struggle, not just to defend ourselves from siege, but to widen and broaden and enlarge our gains to move forward towards what? What is it that we want? What is it that we're willing to defend each other for? Just like that trade union argument, what are your grievances that we can put together into a movement powerful enough and independent enough that it will not stop fighting until every battle's won? And if you wonder, but who would lead that? Who would get out there and have the courage to take on the powers that be today? The war makers, the corporations and the banks that seem so all-powerful with their militaries. And who is it that wouldn't be afraid to be baited? Who is it that is going to have enough courage to try to put together the grievances, to stay together, to hammer out with each other what we want for our demands and what is a sensitive way to put them forward and how to be the best allies for each other. Where are those leaders? Then I would say, in the words of the late black poet June Jordan, we are the ones we have been waiting for. We are in this room.